Recently I published a video about a long-forgotten German military operation codenamed Snowman or Schneemann that was launched in the Netherlands in early January 1945. Some kind of support operation for the Ardennes offensive, the latter having become stalled in the face of very strong US resistance. At the same time that Snowman was conducted, a large new German offensive codenamed Nordwind or Northwind was launched in Alsace, far to the south of the Ardennes, along the Franco-German border on the River Rhine. Again, the purpose being to relieve pressure on the German armies fighting in Belgium and Luxembourg. Nordwind itself became stalled, the Germans only managing to advance some 10 miles before bitter attritional fighting with US forces blunted and then stopped their drive. However, there was yet another large-scale German operation conducted around the same time as Nordwind that was partially successful, and unusually, this operation was commanded by Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler, who was no general. Hitler had become disturbed by what he perceived as the German army's defeatism prior to the Ardennes and Nordwind operations. He felt that the field marshals and generals were, in some cases, less than fully committed to his projects, which was indeed true. The German High Command knew that the forces at its disposal, though strong on paper, were weak in reality, with the divisions mostly being reconstructed, full of conscripts and transfers from the Luftwaffe and Navy, with very little infantry training or experience, held together by a corps of experienced officers and NCOs from the old days. The army faced severe fuel shortages, ammunition shortages, particularly artillery shells, and transport problems. And with Allied air superiority over the battlefield, the chances of a huge offensive like that in the Ardennes being successful were remote. The senior generals had proposed before the Ardennes offensive that Germany build up its western defences, drawing the Allies into the kind of attritional fighting that had worked well for the Germans in the Hürtgen forest, and that if offensive operations were forced upon them, the army should launch smaller offensives designed to encircle and destroy Allied divisions and corps, weakening the Allies' ability to push into Germany in force. Nordwind was the first of these sequential limited offensives to be tried, and its stalling caused Hitler to cancel a follow-up operation against the Americans. However, in order to stiffen the resolve of his armies in the West, Hitler had taken the extraordinary decision sometime before the Ardennes offensive to appoint Himmler to a new military command of his own, called Oberkommando Oberrhein, or Upper Rhine High Command, often erroneously called Army Group Upper Rhine in history books, but this latter title was only used for the last 3 days of its existence. Upper Rhine High Command was formed as a headquarters unit on the 26th of November 1944, and Himmler appointed its commander on the 10th of December, 6 days before the Ardennes offensive opened. The headquarters controlled the German 19th Army, facing the Americans and French in Alsace, within what was called the Colmar Pocket, the last significant slice of French territory still held by the Germans. It also controlled some units of the replacement army, which Himmler had also commanded since the attempted assassination of Hitler on the 20th of July 1944 at the Wolf's Lair by a group of disillusioned army officers. So why Himmler? It seemed that Hitler believed that appointing Himmler, head of the SS and the police amongst other things, would stiffen the resolve of the army in the Alsace region and provoke fanatical efforts by local Nazi Party officials and organizations to resist the advancing Allies coming over the Rhine. Himmler was Hitler's most trusted acolyte and also a brilliant organizer, and was greatly feared by everyone, and Hitler believed that Himmler's skills could also be harnessed in the military realm, even though professional generals were horrified to find themselves under the command of a politician with no military command experience whatsoever and apparently no aptitude for the task he had been handed. Himmler would command the operation from his luxurious special train, which was itself inadequate, lacking proper communications for an army group command. But Himmler was, in reality, of course, leaning heavily on properly qualified military officers to run the Upper Rhine High Command for him, though he did interfere constantly in its operations. That the command was completely separated from the regular army chain of command was interesting, with Himmler only being answerable to Hitler himself, making for an uncomfortable relationship with surrounding army groups. As Operation Nordwind plodded into action in early January 1945, Himmler was instructed by Hitler to launch a subordinate support operation. A seemingly advantageous occurrence had presented itself to Himmler. A large proportion of his command occupied the Colmar pocket, as I said, the last significant chunk of French territory in German hands. The French and US offensives up to November 1944 had successfully captured a huge swathe of Alsace up to the Rhine frontier, including the cities of Belfort and Strasbourg. But the Colmar pocket had not yet been reduced, and with Allied attention on the battle raging in the Ardennes and also subsequently the Nordwind offensive to the north, the Germans noticed that US forces were pulling out of the area north of Strasbourg. Himmler saw an opportunity to support Nordwind and also further his own political ambitions. He would recapture Strasbourg, the capital of Alsace, and present it to Hitler by the 30th of January 1945 as a present to celebrate the Führer's 12th anniversary of his accession to power in 1933. In Himmler's mind, the evident failure the 5th and 6th Panzer armies in the Ardennes of reaching and recapturing the strategic port of Antwerp was to his advantage. He would please Hitler immeasurably by handing him the consolation prize of Strasbourg, a major European city, which would be a major propaganda coup for the Germans. Himmler would pull off an operation of his own that would further show up the professional generals that were failing so badly in the Ardennes and with Operation Nordwind. Himmler's offensive to recapture Strasbourg was codenamed Unternehmen Sonnenwende, or Operation Winter Solstice, and involved a pincer move. Himmler would use the 19th Army defending the Colmar pocket to conduct an operation that would be the southern arm of his pincer against Strasbourg. A force derived from the 64th Army Corps would make a push against weak French forces covering the northern portion of the pocket. This would be the German 198th Infantry Division with limited armoured support from the 106th Panzer Brigade and other elements, totaling perhaps 40 or 50 tanks and assault guns. The northern arm of Himmler's pincer would be the 14th SS Corps on the east bank of the Rhine in Germany. It would effect a crossing of the Rhine at the town of Gamsheim, securing a bridgehead before launching an armoured attack to the north of Strasbourg. The 14th SS Corps consisted primarily the 553rd Volksgrenadier Division, with some attached units from the replacement army, including an SS police regiment that gave the corps its SS designation. Most of the troops, however, were from the army. Its limited armoured force was Jagdpanzerabteilung von Lüttichau, consisting of one company of Panzer IVs from the Army's Panzer Regiment II, 2 companies of Nashorn tank destroyers, and 3 companies of Hetzers. Himmler's forces struck on the 5th of January 1945 when the 14th SS Corps successfully crossed the Rhine at Gamsheim against negligible opposition, quickly carving out a defensive bridgehead. Within hours, heavy Rhine ferries began moving the armour across, and Kampfgruppe von Lüttichau sent out task forces that quickly occupied the towns of Herlesheim and Offendorf. The US 6th Corps became aware of the Gamsheim bridgehead almost immediately, but made no serious efforts to contain it for several days, believing it to be too minor in view of the fighting that was going on further north against the Nordwind assault. Basically, the Americans had their hands full. The only unit able to try and stop the Germans around Gamsheim was Task Force Linden from the 42nd Infantry Division, 3 inexperienced American regiments strung out thinly to cover the area to the north of Strasbourg, with the defence of Strasbourg itself given to the French 2nd Corps from the 6th of January onwards. Weak US counterattacks were bundled aside by the 14th SS Corps, who managed to expand the Gamsheim bridgehead to a depth of about 10 miles. At the same time this was going on, the Germans had brought in the fresh and very experienced 6th SS Mountain Division Nord onto the Nordwind front, and this unit managed to make the furthest penetration south to the town of Wingen-Zamoda, leaving the US 6th Corps heavily engaged on both its northern and eastern flanks. The US 6th Corps committed fresh divisions to the Alsace front on the 6th of January to counter the Nordwind threat south, while the French rushed more forces to the Strasbourg area. The 6th Corps commander tried to deal with the Gamsheim bridgehead first by reinforcing the area with more infantry battalions from the 79th Division, and on the 8th of January committing the recently arrived and green 12th Armoured Division, which deployed one of its combat commands against the bridgehead. However, while this was going on, a fresh German attack began in the south, out of the Colmar pocket, Himmler's southern pincer attack towards Strasbourg. The 198th Infantry Division supported by the 106th Panzer Brigade. The German assault concentrated on the west side of the Rhone-Rhine Canal, and on the 7th of January, the bulk of the armour and one regiment, the 198th Division, pushed through weak French defences to capture the town of Erstein, then swung back to the southwest along the Ill River to trap the French units engaging the rest of the 198th units. Most of the surrounded French troops managed to escape across the Ill River that night, but the German forces, reinforced by one regiment of the 269th Volksgrenadier Division from the east side of the Rhine, captured the entire west side of the Ill River, and by the 11th of January controlled the west bank of the Rhine all the way to Erstein. But due to the weakness of German forces in this thrust, and a cancellation by Hitler of the order for the rest of the 269th Division to join in the attack, the German forces in the southern pincer stopped on the 11th of January, having extended the Colmar pocket a few miles north along the Rhine, but having got nowhere near Strasbourg. The main effort therefore remained the northern pincer out of Himmler's Gamsheim bridgehead. The 7th of January, the Nordwind offensive had been resumed with a fresh attack by the 39th Panzer Corps. However, the German High Command couldn't decide what to do with its operational reserve, which included the still powerful 10th SS Panzer Division Fronsberg. The decision was taken to commit most of the reserve east of the Hagenau forest along the Rhine in an effort to link up with Himmler's Gamsheim bridgehead and then to encircle and trap the bulk of the US 6th Corps. Himmler's effort to capture Strasbourg had failed, but he opportunistically transferred his efforts to effecting the link-up between the 39th Panzer Corps that would attack south out of Lauterburg down the west bank of the Rhine with the bridgehead that he had successfully established at Gamsheim. Accordingly, on the 16th of January 1945, the 39th Panzer Corps, consisting of the 10th SS Panzer Division Fronsberg, the 7th Parachute Division, and the 384th and 667th Assault Gun Brigades, plus Himmler's own escort battalion, made the final Nordwind attack south down the west bank of the Rhine, in an attempt to link up with the 14th SS Corps bridgehead at Gamsheim. The direction of the German offensive came as a surprise to the Americans, but the Americans began operations to try and contain and then crush this assault. On the 16th of January, the US 12th Armoured Division struck again for Herlesheim, hoping to encircle the town. The attack, however, went badly. The 43rd Tank Battalion and the 17th Armoured Infantry Battalion met ferocious German resistance, including a lot of artillery fire, losing 12 tanks during the attack on the town of Offendorf. But the 17th Armoured Infantry Battalion did manage to struggle into Herlesheim, but was then pushed out by a German infantry counterattack. Himmler's bridgehead at Gamsheim had received a serious reinforcement from the 39th Panzer Corps. Elements of the 10th SS Panzer Division were put through the bridgehead to spearhead the German breakout from Gamsheim in connection with the rest of the 39th Panzer Corps attack against the 6th Corps. The spearhead group was from SS Panzer Regiment 10, consisting of 50 Panzer IVs and at least 40 Panther tanks. The 10th SS Panzer attacked the same time as Combat Command A, the 12th Armoured Division. Both sides took heavy losses on the 17th of January. The US 43rd Tank Battalion managed to fight its way into Herlesheim from the south, but radio contact with this unit was then lost. The Panther Tank Company of SS Panzerabteilung 10 under Obersturmbannführer Erwin Bachmann attacked into Herlesheim, completely destroying the US 43rd Tank Battalion. The Americans lost 28 Shermans destroyed and 10 were captured and reused by the Germans. Bachmann received the Knight's Cross, and following the destruction of the 43rd Tank Battalion, the 17th Armoured Infantry positions in Herlesheim were overrun in the pre-dawn hours of the 18th of January. For more information on the battle with the 43rd Tank Battalion, please see the link to my video describing this action in some detail. However, the 10th SS Panzer Division was unable to advance further than Killstedt, where in heavy fighting between the 17th to the 21st of January, it lost 21 Panthers and 8 Panzer IVs, halting any further advance. With the elimination of the Ardennes Bulge by late January, the Americans were able to bring in more divisions to halt the German push around Hagenau, and a stalemate situation developed at Hatten, Rittershofen and Herlesheim. The Germans had been stopped, but the Americans didn't want to waste any more troops in the village stalemates north of the Hagenau forest. 6th Corps was ordered to withdraw to a new defensive line on the Moder River south of the Hagenau forest beginning on the 20th to 21st of January. The 39th Panzer Corps initially didn't realize that the Americans had pulled back, but once they knew, immediately advanced from Rittershofen south to finally link up with the Gamsheim bridgehead on the 22nd of January. Overconfident, the Germans tried to push into Bischwiller and Hagenau, but suffered heavy casualties for few gains. A few small bridgeheads over the Moder were eliminated in the coming days. Attacks in this sector were finally halted on the 26th of January. The following day, units began to be transferred to the Eastern Front to deal with the massive Soviet offensive there. As for Army Group Upper Rhine, as it became for the last 3 days of its existence, it was dissolved on the 29th of January 1945. Himmler, however, was long gone, having turned over command to SS Oberstgruppenführer Paul Hauser on the 24th of January, and with his staff transferred to her new Eastern Military Command, Army Group Vistula. So what had Himmler achieved as an army commander? He had successfully pushed the Colmar pocket a few miles north along the River Rhine, though garrisoning the newly captured territory placed a great strain on the already overextended 19th Army. Himmler had successfully captured and expanded a small bridgehead on the west bank of the Rhine at Gamsheim, and fought and won a few small tactical victories against US forces, but he had failed in his Operation Sonnenwende objective of recapturing Strasbourg, and had failed to effect a link-up with the 39th Panzer Corps at Gamsheim until the Americans had voluntarily given up some ground to make this possible. Hitler would give Himmler a second opportunity for military glory, this time on the Eastern Front with Army Group Vistula. How he did will be the subject of a future video. Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.